In the heartland of America, nestled among the rolling fields of Indiana, stood a farm that seemed like any other. To the townsfolk of La Porte, it looked ordinary, quiet, steady, a place where hard work fed families and where the American dream was cultivated in soil and sweat. But behind the creaking wooden doors of that farmhouse lurked something far darker. The farm belonged to Belle Gunness, a woman who appeared strong, resourceful, and hardworking. She was a widow who had suffered tragedy, losing husbands, children, and security. Yet somehow, she always managed to land on her feet. Some called her unlucky, others whispered that she was cursed. Few, if any, dared to believe what would later be revealed, that Belle herself was the storm. Neighbors admired her strength. She was broad-shouldered, towering over many men in town, and capable of handling grueling farm labor on her own. In a time when women were expected to remain in the shadows of men, Belle stood in the light, commanding, determined, and formidable. But beneath this facade of resilience lay something monstrous. What no one knew then was that Belle's farm was not a sanctuary, it was a graveyard. Her story would come to terrify America, weaving together themes of greed, deception, and a chilling capacity for violence. She wasn't just a widow. She wasn't just a farmer. She was something else entirely, a predator who lured men into her home with promises of love, wealth, and stability, only to bury those promises, and those men, beneath the very soil they had hoped to share with her. This is the story of Belle Gunness, the woman history would come to call the Black Widow of La Porte. And it all began with charm, tragedy, and whispers of opportunity. But what kind of woman could live a double life so convincingly? And how did a quiet farm in Indiana become a place of nightmares? Before the graves were dug, before the lies were spun, Belle was just a girl in Norway. Born in 1859 as Brynhild Paulsdatter Struseth, she grew up in poverty. Her family struggled, and from a young age, she learned that life was merciless. Stories suggest that Belle was ambitious, even ruthless, from her earliest years. She envied the wealth of others and despised the hand life had dealt her. Some accounts whisper of a pivotal event in her youth. A man attacked her while she was pregnant, and she miscarried after the assault. According to local gossip, Belle never forgave the cruelty of men or the world. By the time she reached adulthood, Belle had set her eyes beyond Norway. She wanted more. America was the land of dreams, where even the poor could rise to wealth and respectability. In 1881, she boarded a ship and crossed the Atlantic. In Chicago, she reinvented herself. She shed Brynhild and became Belle, a name easier for Americans to remember. Soon after, she married Mads Sorensen, a fellow Norwegian immigrant. Together, they built a modest life. They opened a candy store, but it failed. Misfortune seemed to follow Belle, but strangely, tragedy also seemed to benefit her. When their house and store mysteriously burned down, insurance money appeared to rescue them. When tragedy struck again, and 2 of Belle's children died suddenly of colitis, a disease known for causing stomach pain and diarrhea, questions lingered. But in that era, childhood deaths were tragically common. No one looked too closely. Then came Mads himself. On the day his life insurance policy overlapped with a new one, Mads died suddenly of heart failure, or so Belle said. The doctor noted poisoning as a possibility, but Belle insisted on a heart condition. Conveniently, she collected thousands in insurance money. Belle, the grieving widow, was left richer than ever. But was she truly unlucky, or was this the first sign of her dark pattern? If tragedy seemed to follow Belle everywhere, why did it also leave her wealthier, stronger, and freer? With insurance money in hand, Belle moved to La Porte, Indiana, a quiet farming town where she could start fresh. In 1901, she purchased a farm on the outskirts of town. The farmhouse was large, with sprawling land perfect for crops, livestock, and something else. At first, Belle was respected as a hardworking woman. She managed the farm herself, chopping wood, handling animals, and plowing fields, tasks unusual for a woman of the time. But Belle wasn't like other women. She was strong, nearly 6 feet tall, weighing over 200 pounds, and carried herself with an intimidating presence. Not long after arriving in La Porte, Belle remarried, this time to Peter Gunness, a fellow Norwegian immigrant. But the marriage was brief. Within a week, tragedy struck again. Peter's infant daughter from a previous marriage died while in Belle's care. Months later, Peter himself was dead, reportedly after a meat grinder fell on his head. Suspicious? Yes. But Belle insisted it was an accident, and townsfolk, though uneasy, let it go. Now a twice-widowed woman, Belle managed to hold on to sympathy. Some pitied her misfortunes. Others admired her strength. But whispers had begun. People wondered, how could one woman endure so much tragedy? Still, Belle's farm continued to thrive, and she was far from finished writing her story. But how does a widow who has buried 2 husbands and children transform her grief into opportunity? The answer lay in the lonely hearts of men across America. In the early 1900s, loneliness was dangerous. For immigrant men who toiled in cities and farmlands, finding a wife wasn't easy. Mail-order ads and personal columns became lifelines, offering companionship and hope for a better future. Belle saw her opening. She began placing ads in Norwegian-language newspapers, describing herself as a wealthy widow with a prosperous farm in need of a strong partner. She promised security, companionship, and the possibility of building a new life together. Her words were deliberate. She mentioned her wealth. She hinted at loneliness. She requested only men who could contribute financially to join her. Soon, letters poured in. Men across the Midwest dreamed of Belle's farm, of her promise of stability. Many sold their belongings, withdrew savings, and boarded trains to Indiana with everything they owned. Belle welcomed them with charm. She cooked hearty meals, spoke warmly, and hinted at marriage. She encouraged them to bring cash. After all, marriage required financial preparation. But once these men entered Belle's farmhouse, they were never seen again. How could so many disappear without anyone noticing? And what secrets were buried in the soil of La Porte? The first visitors came quietly. Neighbors occasionally noticed strangers arriving at Belle's farm. Men with suitcases, men with new clothes, men who never stayed long. Belle explained them away. They were suitors, visitors, relatives, or farmhands who had moved on. But the pattern was too consistent. Each man arrived with money. Each man vanished. And each time, Belle seemed just a little more secure financially. Letters from families began arriving in La Porte. Mothers asked if their sons had reached Belle's farm. Brothers inquired about siblings who had written excitedly about marrying Belle. The replies, when Belle even bothered to send them, were vague. She claimed men had moved on westward, or lost interest, or left suddenly. But suspicion was growing. A cloud was forming over the Gunness farm, one that would soon darken into a storm of horror. What lay beneath Belle's farm, hidden just out of sight, waiting for someone to uncover it. By 1906, whispers around town had become harder to ignore. Too many men had come and gone. Too many families wrote letters of concern. And yet Belle remained calm, almost smug. One suitor, Ole Budsberg, sold his farm in Wisconsin and brought cash to Belle's farm. His family never saw him again. Another, Andrew Helgelien, wrote home about his excitement, even sending letters from La Porte describing Belle's charms. Then, silence. But Andrew's brother, Arsel Helgelien, refused to ignore the silence. He grew suspicious and pressed for answers. He traveled to La Porte, demanding to know where Andrew had gone. Belle coolly insisted Andrew had left suddenly. She suggested he had gone west, leaving her behind. Something about her calmness unsettled Arsel. But without proof, what could he do? Belle's mask of charm and tragedy was still holding. But not for long, because on the Gunness farm, the truth was buried, literally. And soon, the soil itself would betray her secrets. On April 28, 1908, the Gunness farm erupted in flames. By morning, the farmhouse was reduced to ash and smoke. Inside, searchers found the bodies of Belle's children and the remains of a headless woman, believed to be Belle herself. The town was stunned. Had Belle, after so much tragedy, finally fallen victim to disaster? Or was something else at play? Neighbors whispered of enemies, jealousies, and even curses. But investigators were about to stumble upon something far darker. As ashes cooled, searchers began digging through the ruins. What they found in the surrounding earth would horrify America. What secrets had Belle taken to the grave? Or had she even gone to the grave at all? While sifting through the wreckage, investigators noticed disturbed soil around the hog pen. They began digging, and what they unearthed froze them in horror. First came bones, then entire bodies. Layer upon layer, the earth revealed men, women, and even children. Some were dismembered, others reduced to skeletons. Belle's farm was not just a farm. It was a cemetery. The scale was staggering. Dozens of remains emerged. Each corpse was another unanswered letter, another man who vanished after seeking love. The truth was undeniable. Belle Gunness had been luring victims, murdering them, and burying them in her own yard. But one question remained. If Belle was the killer, whose body lay headless in the farmhouse ruins, had Belle perished in her own fire, or had she escaped, leaving her crimes smoldering behind her. The discovery of bodies turned La Porte into a media circus. Reporters swarmed the town, dubbing Belle Lady Bluebird and the Widow of the Farm. Her name became synonymous with terror, but the headless body left behind complicated everything. Some believed Belle had staged her own death, planting another woman's corpse in her place. Others thought she had truly perished in the flames. Sightings of Belle began popping up across the country, from Chicago to San Francisco. Each report fueled speculation. Was she on the run, blending into immigrant communities, hiding in plain sight? The authorities searched, but Belle was never definitively found. Was Belle Gunness dead, or had America's most terrifying widow vanished into the shadows forever? The story of Belle Gunness left scars on La Porte that never healed. For decades, children whispered about her ghost haunting the fields. Families of victims mourned their vanished loved ones, their bodies unearthed from shallow graves. Belle became legend, a cautionary tale about greed, trust, and the darkness that can hide behind a smile. Her name joined the ranks of America's earliest and most chilling serial killers. But the final chapter was never written. Without proof of her death, Belle's story remains suspended between fact and legend. Was she truly consumed by fire, or did she live on, hidden among strangers, carrying her secrets to the grave? Even today, historians and crime enthusiasts debate her fate. What is certain, however, is that Belle Gunness forever changed how America viewed trust, love, and the lure of opportunity. Because sometimes, the warm light of a farmhouse window is not safety, it's a trap. And the question that lingers more than a century later, did Belle Gunness get away with murder? When the fire consumed Belle's farmhouse in 1908, many believed the story had ended. But in truth, the blaze was only the beginning of the nightmare. Among the ruins lay not only Belle's children, but also that strange, headless female corpse. Investigators assumed it was Belle, but suspicions rose almost immediately. The body was smaller than Belle's known size, and the missing head made positive identification impossible. Neighbors whispered that Belle had been seen acting strangely before the fire, digging holes, selling belongings, and purchasing kerosene. Was the blaze her final act of deception? Reporters descended on La Porte, and headlines screamed of America's most terrifying woman. But even as the world gawked at the graves being dug up on her property, the question lingered. Was Belle truly among the dead, or had she staged the perfect escape? As investigators widened their search, the farm became a scene of unimaginable horror. The hog pen, once a symbol of rural life, was transformed into a mass grave. Bodies were pulled from the soil, torsos without limbs, bones gnawed by animals, skulls fractured. Some remains were so mutilated they could never be identified. The smell of decay hung over the farm for weeks, haunting everyone who passed by. Families arrived from across the Midwest, desperate to learn if their missing sons or brothers had met their end in La Porte. Mothers wept at the sight of bones. Siblings prayed for answers. One of the most heartbreaking discoveries was that Belle hadn't limited her victims to suitors. At least one child's body was found, possibly that of Peter Gunness' daughter, who had died so mysteriously after moving into Belle's home. The graves told a chilling truth. Belle was not just a manipulator. She was a killer of staggering ruthlessness. But if she was capable of such horror, what else had she hidden? Among those demanding answers was Arsel Helgelien, brother of Andrew, who had vanished after corresponding with Belle. Andrew's letters to his family described excitement at Belle's promises of marriage and partnership. Then, silence. Arsel suspected foul play and traveled to La Porte, refusing to be dismissed by Belle's evasions. After the fire, he pressed investigators to dig deeper, literally. It was Arsel who insisted on excavating the hog pen, and it was Arsel who confirmed Andrew's fate when his brother's body was pulled from the ground, hacked apart and buried in Belle's yard. Without Arsel's persistence, Belle's crimes might have remained hidden forever. His determination forced the truth into the open. But as more bodies surfaced, one haunting question loomed larger. How many men had answered Belle's ads, never to be heard from again? In the chaos of the fire and discovery, suspicion quickly fell on Ray Lamphy, Belle's farmhand and rumored lover. Ray had worked for Belle for years, and some believed he knew her darkest secrets. He was deeply infatuated with her, but Belle reportedly dismissed him as little more than a pawn. When she began entertaining wealthy suitors, Ray grew jealous. Belle herself had even filed a complaint against Ray before the fire, claiming he threatened her and her family. Some said she feared him, others believed she was setting him up. After the fire, Ray was arrested, accused of setting the blaze. During his trial, he painted a chilling picture. Belle had killed dozens of men, buried them on her property, and then staged her own death in the fire to escape justice. Was Ray telling the truth, or merely shifting blame to a woman who could no longer defend herself? If Belle had indeed staged her death, then where was she? By piecing together letters, testimonies, and evidence, investigators began to understand Belle's methods. 1. The ad. Belle placed Lonely Hearts ads in newspapers, luring men with promises of wealth and marriage. 2. The arrival. Suitors arrived with savings, expecting a new life. 3. The isolation. Belle charmed them, cooked for them, and convinced them to hand over their money. 4. The murder. Victims were drugged, bludgeoned, or poisoned. Some were dismembered to fit into shallow graves. 5. The disposal. Bodies were buried near the hog pen, where animals and soil would conceal them. It was a cycle repeated again and again. By some estimates, Belle may have killed more than 40 people, making her one of the most prolific female killers in history. Yet she remained undetected for years, hiding in plain sight as a hardworking widow. How could an entire community miss the signs of such monstrous crimes? The discovery of Belle's crimes exploded into headlines nationwide. Reporters called her the Indiana Ogress and Hell's Belle. Crowds swarmed La Porte, hoping to glimpse the farm of horrors. Vendors sold postcards of the ruins. Tourists pocketed pieces of burned timber as souvenirs. The quiet farming town became a grotesque carnival of curiosity. Some newspapers painted Belle as a cunning mastermind. Others portrayed her as a tragic woman driven mad by grief. But the truth was far simpler and far darker. Belle Gunness was motivated by greed and power. Her ability to manipulate men, charm her community, and kill without remorse horrified the nation. But as her legend grew, so did the rumors. And at the center of them all was the mystery that refused to die. Did Belle Gunness perish in the fire, or had she vanished into the night? In the years after the fire, alleged sightings of Belle popped up across the country. Some claimed she was living in Chicago under a new identity. Others swore they saw her in California. Each rumor rekindled fear that the Widow of La Porte still lived, ready to strike again. Authorities investigated several leads, but none confirmed her survival. Without a head to identify the corpse, doubt would forever cloud her fate. Theories abounded. Escape theory. Belle staged the fire, planted another woman's body, and fled. Death theory. The headless corpse truly was Belle, killed either by accident or conspiracy. Accomplice theory. Ray Lamphy, or another unknown partner, helped Belle in her crimes and her possible escape. But with each passing year, the trail grew colder. If Belle had survived, where did she go? And could she have continued killing under a new name? To understand Belle Gunness is to confront a disturbing reality. She did not kill in moments of passion or madness. She killed with calculation. Belle embodied traits of what modern psychology would label a psychopath. Manipulation. She exploited the vulnerabilities of lonely men. Lack of remorse. Victims were buried in her yard as casually as trash. Charm. She could appear warm, motherly, and trustworthy, until the moment she struck. Control. She dictated every detail, from the ads to the murders to the burial. Yet what made her truly terrifying was her duality. To neighbors, she was the grieving widow, the hardworking farmer. To her victims, she was death itself. Belle Gunness was proof that evil can wear a friendly face. And perhaps that is why her story endures, because it forces us to question how well we truly know those around us. Long after the ashes cooled, Belle's presence lingered in La Porte. Locals whispered of ghostly lights over the farm, of shadows near the hog pen. Children dared each other to approach the ruins, claiming Belle's spirit haunted the land. For families of the victims, there was no closure. Many remains were never identified, leaving loved ones lost to history. Even today, the story of Belle Gunness echoes as both horror and folklore. True crime enthusiasts, historians, and ghost hunters alike travel to La Porte, searching for answers. But the farm offers no peace, only silence and memory. And in that silence lies the question that haunts the ages. Did Belle Gunness truly die, or does her shadow still linger in history's blind spots? More than a century later, Belle Gunness remains one of America's most infamous killers. She defied gender expectations, manipulated an entire community, and left behind a trail of bodies that may never be fully counted. Her legacy is not just one of murder, but of unanswered questions. The missing head, the rumors of escape, the possibility that she lived under another name, all of it ensures that Belle's story will never truly be closed. For her victims, justice was never found. For her community, scars were never healed. And for the world, Belle remains both a cautionary tale and a chilling reminder of human darkness. She was not a monster lurking in shadows. She was a woman who cooked meals, raised children, and greeted strangers at her door. That is what makes her story most terrifying. She looked ordinary. And maybe that's the lesson we must never forget. Because sometimes, evil isn't a stranger in the dark. Sometimes, evil is waiting behind a smile, a promise, or the warm glow of a farmhouse window. This was Belle Gunness, the widow who buried her secrets in the soil of her farm, and perhaps in the very fabric of America's nightmares.